Good evening and welcome to Money Matters. My name is Anthony Wilson. I'm here at the heart of the Point Lisas Industrial Estate, which has generated billions of dollars in revenue for Trinidad and Tobago over the last 40 years or so. I'm here to speak with Dr. Dax Driver, who is the CEO of the Energy Chamber at the end of what has been a tumultuous week in the energy sector of this country. Dr. Driver, good evening.
Good evening.
We are at the end of a fairly tumultuous week in the history of the energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago. But I want to start by going back maybe 20 years or so to 1996, 1997, when Trinidad and Tobago was negotiating with some of the large energy companies in the world to bring Atlantic LNG to this country.
Right.
And before that, there were several methanol and ammonia companies that were established on this estate in the 1990s. At that time, it would have meant that Trinidad and Tobago was competitive with other energy countries in the hemisphere and perhaps in the world. How have we been going since 20 years ago in terms of our competitiveness as a destination for investments in downstream energy companies?
Well, for downstream energy companies, so the petrochemical plants and Atlantic LNG, we saw this huge growth from the 1990s into the 2000s with 4 trains of Atlantic being built, the huge methanol plants, expansion in ammonia. So all of that was this massive period of growth. That was fueled by the fact that we had these gas resources available from some large finds from off Trinidad's east coast in particular and some off Trinidad's north coast. Now what's happened since is that obviously the expansion of the downstream industry has stopped. We haven't had any new plants being built since around 2010. Since then, what you have seen is closure of a steel plant, but most significant shortfalls in gas production. The challenge for the country now is how do you actually get the investment into Trinidad's upstream into gas production, because if we don't have that investment in place, we will see continued declines in our gas production and the death of this industry which has been built.
20 years ago, Trinidad and Tobago was a competitive destination for energy investments. Is this country still competitive?
Well, I think if you look at the facts, we have been falling behind what we need in order to sustain the industry here. So there's an unmet market in the country. That suggests we're not competitive. If we were competitive, you would see the investment dollars flowing here to meet the demand which exists in Trinidad for gas. It means we have an opportunity because you have installed downstream capacity. A lot of countries' challenge with gas is not having the demand. We have the demand in place. Our challenge is getting the investment in the upstream to produce the gas to go into that downstream industry.
What do we need to do as a country, as a government, to attract the investment into upstream?
I think there's a number of different things which have to happen. There's not one thing. There's a number of different elements which have to happen. The first thing I think is around clarity. Clarity that investors know where they're going to be able to sell their gas to, and what the contractual terms will be around that. So there's these there's contract negotiations which are taking place between the major producers and NGC. It's very important to have that clarity there, so people know what they can do. We also have to have clarity that the rules aren't going to change. The second area is that we have to have some changes to our tax regime. That's both for the taxes for the exploration and production licenses. The particular issue there is when we have taxes which are against production, so royalty type taxes, which really affect companies badly. When you have profit taxes, companies are much better able to deal with those and add those into their financial models correctly. But also some of the production sharing contracts, I think, have to be looked at again.
And what about other areas of competitiveness?
Sure.
For example, salaries and wages.
I was just going to get onto cost, the cost basis of the industry as well. So I think that for the energy sector, salaries is not a huge cost item for most companies. I think there are some specific cases where you're seeing it in the oil sector. I think in Petrotrin, that is a major issue. But I think for the rest of the industry, it is not the biggest problem area. The biggest problem is really efficiency by which the industry operates. So there's a lot of scope for things to be more productive and things to be more efficient, and better coordination of logistics. Just things like how the ports operate and bringing things in and out of the country, and just the whole ease of doing business. And we have to fix our industrial relations system, not so much because of the wages, but because of the lack of productivity we have.
How much of a problem is the lack of productivity?
I think it's a major problem. I think that you see that very high levels of absenteeism, so a lot of projects gets hampered by people not coming out to work. You see problems of companies not being able to discipline their workforce because really the way in which Trinidad's industrial relations operates means it's difficult for them to do that. So companies sort of lose control of managing their workforce.
What about the cost of doing business? Because obviously if there are delays, if there is lack of efficiency, that pushes up costs.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that people will look at those standard things like the World Bank's ease of doing business reports, and Trinidad scores pretty low in those things. And so that also affects the energy sector.
What do you think the government should do, and what is the government doing to address these issues?
Well, in terms of the cost issues, I mean, I think that one of the things is the reform to the industrial relations environment. We need a reset to Trinidad's industrial relations environment. This was legislation which was put in place in the early 70s with a certain context and a certain global context. That has completely transformed now. We need a whole new industrial relations framework. It's not fiddling with the current legislation, it's actually scrapping the current legislation and starting again. We have advocated very strongly, let's start with the ILO principles, which I think is something which everyone agrees with, so on a tripartite basis between unions, government and the business community. Create systems where there's alignment between the interests of the individual employee and the interests of the company. And when you have that alignment, people then work together to create value. I think then there's other areas, where frankly, it's just about, a lot of it's about cutting red tape and getting the public services to operate with that real emphasis on getting things done in a timely manner, getting things in an efficient manner.
Is the Trinidad model, as it's called, still relevant?
Well, the Trinidad model has always changed over time. There's not one Trinidad model, and so the Trinidad model for gas development has to go through a transition now, and we're in the process of doing that. That is happening, there'll be a different Trinidad model, because really what the model is about is actually being able to adapt to the circumstances which are facing the world. One thing now, I think there seems to be, with this agreement this week, there now seems to be an alignment between the workers and the company increasing production, because they'll get the back pay when production increases. Hopefully that'll spark some new ideas about how you increase that production, and not just go back to the same old way of doing things as existed in the past, not business as usual, but a whole new approach.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. When we come back, Judy speaks with Derek Chin, the owner of Movietown, about his new project.